Welcome to episode 33 of Radio Omnicore. I'm your host, Colleen McClintock, and you are listening to the show that is guaranteed to teach you something useful and introduce you to a dynamic and interesting guest. We are thrilled to host Brendon Bairstow-Klopper. Brendon is a customer experience specialist and director at Enlighten. He is currently running his masterclass in customer experience, and we caught up with him before that event to hear more about the trends in customer experience. It's wonderful to meet you, Brendon, all the way from Cape Town.
Cape Town.
Thank you so much for coming up. And I know that, to understand, you are going to be running some masterclasses in Joburg. I'm sure You'll tell us more about that.
Can do.
And welcome, Hilton. We've shifted you in the room.
Thank you.
You're in a different seat. Let's see how that impacts your performance. Why don't you start off, Brendon, just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So where do I start? From a career perspective, my career started actually in hospitality for all my sins, where I worked for about 16, 17 years. And I went and traveled to the UK. I came back at a fairly young age of about 25, decided I would open up my first kind of hospitality establishment, which was a great success for 2 or 3 years. And then I eventually had to close it down. And that was at the time, a very difficult process of kind of having to unpack all the things that I did wrong. And really started my journey in terms of what I call customer. Things that I could have done better, et cetera, and kind of fast forward to where we are today. I've now been with Enlighten, which is a multidisciplinary client experience company. And I suppose what I bring to the table in terms of our clients, and I work across all the various products that we have on our product shelf as such, is really about bringing the customer into the room, about keeping clients honest when they use a neutral external third party to assist them from a customer experience perspective. And then I think that there's some great learnings that people can take out of the hospitality industry as well. You know, everything from kind of understanding your guests, as an example. You know, when you do business with yourself as an organization in the hospitality industry, we had a saying is, have you actually slept a night in your own bed? Do you know where the plug points are? Do you know where people need to charge their phones, et cetera, et cetera? So that's really helped me from a customer journey mapping perspective, and we can talk a little bit about that. And then just really bringing those principles to life in terms of personalization, authentic, proactive service delivery or experience delivery. So there's a lot of information that I've been able to draw from in terms of my hospitality background.
Is it me?
Sure.
So, Brendon, thanks. That was a very useful intro. I am interested in how customer service is changing. How is it different now than it was 5 years ago?
I think that it has changed exponentially. In fact, I think that customer service is dead. I think it's a thing of the past. When we talk about the world today, customer service has really moved into what we call customer experience. And I suppose a simple analogy would be that customer service is very transactional. So it has a look at single interactions that a customer would have with your business. It has a look at kind of answering the phone within 3 rings, about replying to an email in a certain amount of time, et cetera, and really speaks about what we do rather than how we do it. When we think about customer or client experience, it becomes a lot more well-rounded, a lot more holistic. And I think one of the biggest differences for me is that we start to see our customers as human beings who are driven by the emotions. Because when we think about client experience, it's all about the emotions that we invoke via the experience that we deliver. That's the one aspect. The second aspect is that it no longer just has a look at the single interaction points, but rather has a look at all the interactions or engagements that a customer has with your business. And the challenge there is that our customers and clients are starting to evaluate that experience almost at an intuitive level out of sector. So thinking about if you take your partner out for dinner, the next time that you go into the bank and you want to do something, you are evaluating that experience on the experience you've just had in the restaurant, or the experience you've had with your telcos, etc., etc. And that makes it quite difficult for businesses today because of that expectation that is constantly changing. And because our customers aren't just evaluating us against our particular vertical as such, but also what's happening out there in the world.
And I think the reviews are instant. I mean,
exactly.
So it's not that it could have in the past be hidden. There was that one bad review that you did your own feedback on. It's on Google immediately.
Exactly.
Rated.
Exactly. I mean, there are a couple of challenges that are facing businesses today. One, obviously, is just, the world has become a lot more uncertain. Mm-hmm. If you think about what's happening in the economy, et cetera, and as a result, our customers are becoming a lot more discerning. They're doing a lot more homework. They're doing a lot more research before they're actually willing to hand over their cold, hard cash. The second thing is that the world has become a lot smaller. And, traditionally, physical boundaries or the landscape no longer hinders purchasing behavior from a customer perspective. And lastly, and to your point, what we call the consumer grapevine has literally received a steroid injection. So word of mouth, whether that be positive or negative, now travels at an eye-watering pace, and the reach is unbelievable. When we were running restaurants, etc., there was the rule that if you had a good experience, you would tell 2 of your friends. If you had a bad experience, you would tell 10 of your friends. Now, with the advent of social media, I have the opportunity of going and telling 500 million people on Facebook or Twitter, etc., and that puts a lot of pressure on businesses.
I'm just curious in terms of how you market your services to organizations. So take our organization, for example. How do you show ROI when you bring in the idea of bring the customer into the room? So be inspirational, less instructional around your experience. How do businesses benefit from that?
Sure. So we've, maybe if I can take it a step back, we have 4 kind of products on our product shelf. So a lot of the work we do is deep-seated in research and research insights. And there we work a lot in the B2B environment, but also in the B2C environment. And really the ROI there is we have been able to ask the difficult questions. It's all around mitigating risk. So about how do you retain and grow your client base and the products and services that they are using. And we have got a multitude of examples where our client's customer was literally going to drop their account, which would have been devastating for their business. And through the research process and being able to feed back those insights in a concise way, they were actually able to save that particular account. We also, we also do a lot of training. And there, the ROI is all around employee engagement. It's all about the feedback that you're getting from, customers and consumers, because we train frontline staff, et cetera. It's about developing strategies, which is one of our other product offerings. And when the strategy starts to get to implementation, how does that implementation affect the overall client experience? And that can be measured. And we do put measures in place. And then lastly, from a customer journey mapping perspective or an employee journey mapping perspective, how do we alleviate some of the pain points that clients and customers and employees have through their journey or life cycle with that organization. And again, that's something that can absolutely be measured. So we tie it into kind of business outcomes.
Well, it's interesting that you speak about both engagement and your customer, because I had that quote from Richard Branson, and he says, clients don't come first, employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of your clients, which speaks more to the engagement side. And then if you look at the client, or your client always comes first. That's what we always taught. You must respond to your client no matter what, no matter how busy you are, your client comes first. So how on earth do you manage all those stakeholders' pinch points?
So in any business, and Richard Branson is a guru, in my mind, but in any business, obviously customer comes first. Where I think that there is some crossover in terms of the client experience vis-a-vis the employee experience is that the customer experiences your brand and your product and your service via the employees that are delivering that. And I think that you absolutely have to get your employees on board. They've got to buy into the vision and the purpose of the organization. They've got to buy into the vision in terms of what great service looks like for your particular brand. And then they've got to be trained and motivated and coached continuously to be able to deliver that. But then at the same time, also be empowered so that they have a level of autonomy to create memorable client experiences on the fly without the fear of retribution. Obviously, within a controlled environment.
And have work-life balance.
Yeah, that's, from an employee engagement perspective, and particularly when we have a look at the new generations that are coming into the workplaces today, work-life balance is absolutely vital for them. And as well as corporate culture. If they don't connect to a corporate culture, they don't want to work there.
So Brendon, I wonder if I could ask you, how generalizable are the rules of customer experience? If I go to a bank versus go to a movie versus go to a restaurant versus read a newspaper, are there, and without wanting to oversimplify or dumb it down, are there like some cardinal rules of customer experience that you think are non-negotiable?
Yes, absolutely.
I'd be curious to hear them.
Absolutely. So I think that there are some cardinal rules. And then according to your brand, you would create some, ones that are more customized to your particular brand that gives the kind of flavor and what differentiates. But some of the cardinal rules for me, and there's been a lot of research around this, is make customers feel valued. The number one driver of customer loyalty is make me feel valued. And that sounds fairly obvious.
It sounds obvious, but every time I go to a bank and I wait for hours and just not getting attention.
So it's make me feel valued. It's when I have a problem, help me resolve it. And let me be part of that process. I think a lot of companies get it wrong, where a customer makes a complaint and they just go into fix-it mode without actually realizing that we are all different. And although, again, freedom within a controlled environment, for me, if I go and have a bad experience in a restaurant, the worst thing somebody can do is offer me a free cup of coffee. I want to throw it against the wall. That's not the reason why I'm complaining. I think, and this has been proven, the number 3 driver of customer loyalty is speak to me in simple language. And I think that as organizations, we get so stuck with our internal jargon, et cetera, that when we actually engage with customers, we forget that we are engaging with human beings. And I don't want to use the word dumb it down, but speak to me in a conversational yet professional way. I think some of the other absolute non-negotiables are taking accountability and responsibility for fixing issues. I think that another non-negotiable for me is speed of response, particularly in terms of the world in which we live in. information at our fingertips. You just push a button and Google will, spew out all the information you need. So that's absolutely critical. I think it's also about flaunting your flaws. So if you don't know the answer, if you don't have the answer yet, rather than not going back to the customer, it's about follow through and follow up and follow up and follow up and follow up. Rather let them know, I promised to call you at 5 o'clock. This is your 4 o'clock call. I don't have an answer yet. I am working on it. This is what I'm busy with. Would you mind if I can call you at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning? As a customer, I feel valued. I feel heard. I know that somebody's, kind of on it. And I'm much more likely to be a lot more lenient than if I didn't have the information in the first place or it wasn't communicated to me.
So I do a lot of online shopping.
Yes.
And there's quite a lot of competition going on in that space. But Pick n Pay have been quite cute recently because what they're doing now is exactly what you're saying. So lots of little SMSs. So yesterday I got the SMS, "Hi, my name's Gavin. I'm at your door.
Okay.
And or I'm about 5 minutes away from your home. Please be ready for me." And just this keeping me in the loop with when my delivery's arriving. So it makes sense what you're saying around just making the customer feel that you're attending to them.
Yes. And I think that it can be quite a fine line. So, if we had to have a look at developing a customer journey per se in terms of the digital online space, it's about choosing key interaction points where you would keep the customer in the loop. Rather than bombard them with information, because that can also become, frustrating or irritating from a client
a bit spammy at times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely keep them in the loop, but make sure that the message is on point, it's well articulated, and it's at the right time.
Now that's a tricky one because in our world of consulting, you just don't know what you're dealing with, based on the person you're working with. So some people might consider you being over-consulting in the way that you're contacting them. Other people might feel that you're very distant. So would that be important to contract with that specific person, how much communication they want, or is that too bespoke?
Certainly in our world, because we also have a consultancy-based business, which is very bespoke and very relationship-based, I have absolutely no qualms in actually asking the clients that I deal with what that engagement model must look like and feel like. So that's one way of doing it. If it's more consumer focused, I would probably have a look at my different customer personas, kind of customer segments, really understand what makes them tick, what keeps them awake at night, what things that they would value, etc., etc. And although it's a generalization, then have a look at communication and engagement opportunities based on that particular persona. So the business person vis-a-vis the home executive, vis-a-vis somebody with children, etc., etc., because that all creates a set of needs and wants that we need to deliver on for that persona to perceive that they've had a great experience.
I seem to live on a different planet to you because the way you're talking about things, I just never experienced customer service or customer experience in that way. I'm generally appalled at the level of services I find almost across the board. And I kind of think, I mean, I'm not sure if this is what you're offering, but you almost train clients about what it means to be effective in the customer experience space.
Yes.
It's not a natural thing for people to know it, that there's a science behind it that you can tap into.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where you come from, am I right?
It is. So, I mean, I think that's exactly what we do, depending on kind of the product offering as such, et cetera, but certainly within the training space, because we do open programs a couple of times a year, both in Johannesburg and Cape Town. We do very bespoke training interventions where it will be customized according to brand and business outcomes. And then we also kind of train and coach and mentor at various levels within the organization. So from a frontline staff, worker bee, if I can call it that kind of level, through to a supervisory level, management, senior executive, et cetera, et cetera. But taking a step back, I think that it really starts from a recruitment perspective. So who you're recruiting into your business. We spoke a little bit about psychometric testing, just because I think it's an interest of both of ours, prior to the podcast. Looking at psychometric testing from a skills perspective is all well and good, but I would be interested to know about what characteristics the organization's been looking for. And from a service perspective, we've identified 4 or 5 key characteristics. So it's about having a genuine personal warmth. It's about attention to detail. It's about being able to work within a team. You know what I mean? So there's 5 or 6 key characteristics that I would certainly want to bring into my interview process, into my psychometric process, so that when you bring on new recruits, obviously, they need to connect with your brand, with your values, with your vision, et cetera, but then also to have that kind of that service DNA. You know what I mean? That's kind of intrinsically within them, because again, obviously, depending on the role, you don't want to employ somebody in an actuary position if they haven't studied actuarial science, but in our mind, you can train for skill, or you can hone for skill, but it's very difficult to train for behavior as such. And that's where I think that companies need to kind of bridge the gap, is also to have a look at that soft skills, emotionally intelligence type characteristics.
Look, I'm pleased to say that in the psychometric space, the things you're talking about are very routine.
Yes.
There's well-established science and instruments around kind of picking up those things. Plus, normally there's some kind of immersion exercises, role plays, where you can really tap into EQ, people's emotional resilience. Those kind of things are really, really key. So we also look for those things, and I'll share with you that they're absolutely crucial. Maybe not in every role. I mean, you do have some backroom roles where, it doesn't matter, the person's crunching numbers somewhere in the background. But I would say for most, probably for 80% of the people who are going to work for you, those are absolutely key things.
I think, and I agree with you, I think to that point, what I would add is everyone is responsible for delivering the end client experience. So I think if I had to give advice to business today, it's don't just focus on your traditional frontline or customer-facing roles, but really, bring in the back office roles as well, and make sure that everyone understands how their role impacts and contributes to the client experience. And that can be done, in various ways. It could be just taking your value set and articulating a set of behaviors according to your specific role. So when we talk about passion for our customers, or whatever that looks like and feels like, if I'm sitting in IT, what does that look like and feel like for me? What does great customer service look like internally? You know what I mean? Because there's sometimes a big disconnect between what sales is selling and what ops is able to deliver, et cetera, et cetera. So another consideration.
And just on the other level, that we're all collaborating, working together, and we're our own customers inside of the business. So
100%.
We also want to have a human connection and be warm.
100%.
Those kind of
100%.
Yeah.
I think, and I do have to laugh. I think what also tends to happen, and this is where training and coaching and mentoring and those good things come into play, is once we walk into our businesses, our places of work, we take our customer hat off and we put our work cap on, and we forget that we are actually customers in each other's businesses, and we forget to see things from the customer lens. And I think that if we were able to bring that back into the workplace, it would have a huge impact on overall client or customer experience. Whether that is, always having an empty chair, in your meeting rooms, which, that's the customer in the room. What do they think? Somebody who wears a cap, I'm customer for the day. Even to having, real life decals in your meeting rooms or in the office spaces based on your persona, so that the customer, the client, is always with you.
It's very gestalt.
Yeah,
To do that.
exactly.
I really enjoyed reading some of the blogs on your website, and I encourage
Yes.
anyone to go and check them out. They're really interesting. And the one I found fascinating was the myths and, just debunking those myths. And I also watched a TED talk around the bar is really low, to Hilton's point. Customer service, I think in South Africa, we can take Eskom, for example.
Sure.
It feels like we just constantly just lower our standards as we live in South Africa. Is there a difference globally to what you see with what customers would put up with and to what we put up with here?
Certainly what we see on a global scale is, in terms of customer experience, South Africa is probably still 3 to 4 years behind emerging markets, or not emerging markets, more established markets in terms of the States and the UK. And I think that you have to look at that differently. So on the one hand, overseas, people are, they don't put up with bad service. And they are quite vocal in expressing that. That's the one aspect. I think what South Africa has going for it is our people. Because I think that we do display a genuine personal warmth, which is one of the key characteristics for us in terms of that kind of, service DNA. I think where we are let down is when we have a look at what's happening in our government institutions, when we start to have a look at what's happening in government, in general, et cetera. And it makes us a little bit complacent. It makes us, what can I do? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, what can my voice do, et cetera. And I think, again, that's where the power of social really comes into place, because our voice holds a lot more weight. Again, it's a gross generalization, but I think that South Africans do tend to put up with bad service a lot more. I've stopped complaining to the manager, in inverted commas, because I feel it's not going to go anywhere. I feel that it's going to, go onto deaf ears. But I'm very happy to stand in the line of my bank for, heaven forbid that I actually have to go into a physical bank anymore to do anything. But, and I'm not getting the service I receive. I'm happy to go and make a tweet or go post something on their Facebook page. And unfortunately, that's when you get the reply.
Not always, though. It depends on the brand.
It does depend on the brand.
Yeah.
It does depend on the brand. And I think that, we can talk about some rules in terms of what happens in the social space. But yeah, I think that things are getting better, but I think that as South Africans, we don't tend to complain because we feel it's not going to go anywhere. What's going to change?
Well, it's quite nerve-wracking then if you're running an organization like Omnicall, because I think the potential is you just lose the client.
Yes.
They'll just go somewhere else or go to the competitor. So my question was, how do you measure? You said there are ways that you can measure the experience apart from feedback surveys, and what are the ways that you recommend companies engage with? How is your customer service experienced at Omnicall?
So again, I think depending on your business, I would certainly start by getting feedback from frontline staff, so those people who are dealing with customers each and every day. I think that there is a wealth of knowledge that can be tapped into there. I think that there still is a place for customer feedback, whether that is going the traditional route of doing some kind of survey, whether it's web-based, telephonic, et cetera, or if it is keeping a track of what's happening in social media and tracking it that way. I would suggest not doing web-based surveys. I think that you get a lot of stats, but not a lot of insight. And if you were able, and I'm really not kind of punting our wares, but to use an independent, to use an independent company who is able to not only extract more information that the individual company would be able to, it tends to hold a lot more credibility within the business, because it is done by an external, and they tend not to sugarcoat the feedback.
It's true.
You know what I mean? They tend not to say, oh, well, it's Johnny's department, so we won't give them a hard time, or we know there's an issue here, etc., etc. The feedback seems to be more kind of forthcoming and more direct, and we can really pinpoint where the issues are, both at a transactional level as well as from an overall experiential level. But again, it would depend on the business.
Right. So, Brendon, tell us about this exciting workshop you're going to be running in Joburg on the 12th of March.
Yes, indeed. So we run this kind of workshop 2 or 3 times a year. The next one is coming up on the 12th of March. We actually have 10 seats left. We limited to a maximum of 60 delegates. And it's an open program, so delegates are sent from various different companies across various sectors, etc., etc. It's a full-day masterclass, which the theme this year is really about how to operationalize the client experience or customer experience. And some of the outputs or some of the learnings through the masterclass itself is really a introduction into customer journey mapping. And we teach a very simple but powerful methodology that participants and delegates would be able to take back into the workplace from the very next day. It's something called a heartbeat map, where we understand customers' emotions and expectations at various stages of their journey with you, and then start to articulate a number of touch points and understand where some of the opportunities and challenges are within the journey itself. We also have a look at some key building blocks when developing an overall client experience strategy, and some of the things that a business or an individual would need to consider when doing that. We have a look at some key principles and key trends that we're seeing happening both locally and abroad within the customer experience or CX space. And then we've got 2 very exciting guest speakers. So the one is from Alexander Forbes. He's the head of digital solutions. And our second guest speaker is from Old Mutual Insure, and she's the head of client experience for that particular company. It is it's a fun day. As facilitators, we tend to take what we do quite seriously, but not who we are quite seriously. So it's very hands-on. It's very interactive. It's based on a lot of practical exercises, so that participants really get under the skin of client experience, but also the actual methodology and approach when operationalizing the client experience into your business.
And where could people find out more about that?
You can find out on our website. I'll probably spell it for you. So it's Enlighten, which starts with the letter N. So it's NLIGHTEN. CX.com.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, Brendon. Is your organization clear as to what good service looks like? And would you be prepared to eat your own lunch? Some questions that we all need to think about. Really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Check out our website, www.omnicore.co.za, for our blogs and any previous episodes you might be interested. And thank you again to Carlos Naidu, our producer.